They told me my tennis court was now community property, but they never imagined I'd walk into their HOA meeting holding my federal auditor badge and 5 years' worth of suspicious financial records. How exactly would Karen Whitlow, the self-declared queen of Silverwood Haven, explain the $155,000 landscaping consultation fees paid directly to her sister's shell company, while she hosted weekly tennis tournaments on my private court? I remember the exact moment everything changed. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching a peaceful morning in what I thought was a quiet neighborhood. Then I saw them. 5 strangers, rackets in hand, cooler in tow, marching across my backyard like they owned the place. "Excuse me," I called out, hurrying outside in my slippers. "This is private property." A well-dressed woman turned to me, hair perfectly highlighted, smile practiced. "Oh, you must be the new homeowner. I'm Karen Whitlow, HOA president. We have Tuesday morning tennis here. It's in the guidelines." My face flushed. I've read every word of those guidelines. There's nothing about this court being shared. She tilted her head, amused. "Maybe you missed the addendum. The previous owner agreed to community access. You can take it up at the next board meeting. First Thursdays, 7 p.m. Then she turned and strolled off, onto my $35,000 court. That sound, the thwack of tennis balls on my newly resurfaced court, burned through my chest like tiny explosions of disbelief. For 3 days, I tore through every document from my purchase. No mention of shared access. When I called my realtor, she was stunned. "No easement, no disclosure," she insisted. "If that had been there, I'd have told you." The following week only got worse. A youth class showed up on Wednesday, run by Karen's husband. Thursday morning, I came back from the store to find an actual tournament in progress, a folding table and coolers on my patio. I approached a young mom who looked out of place. "Was this court ever shared?" I asked quietly. She glanced at Karen, then whispered, "We moved in 8 months ago." She told us all amenities were shared. She's particular about this court. Said she had one before, but had to downsize. That night, I showed up at the HOA meeting with property maps and my closing documents in hand. 12 neighbors sat awkwardly in folding chairs inside Karen's extravagant home. Photos of tennis trophies lined the walls. When Karen introduced the next topic, community court use, I raised my hand. "This isn't a concern," I said firmly. "It's a legal issue. There is no recorded easement or covenant granting shared use of my court." Karen's smile twitched. "Addendum C outlines." "I'd like to see this mystery Addendum C," I interrupted. "It wasn't in my closing documents. It's not registered with the county. And my realtor confirms it doesn't exist." Silence. The HOA treasurer, Raymond Blake, shuffled through a binder. "Perhaps there was an administrative oversight," he muttered. I stood tall. "Let me be clear. I bought this property with a private tennis court. I have exclusive rights to that court. Any further use by others will be treated as trespassing." Karen's expression hardened. "We've always had access," she snapped. "The previous owner understood community spirit." "Funny," I replied, "because I spoke to him yesterday, and he was shocked." I hadn't. Not yet. But Karen's flicker of panic said everything. This wasn't community tradition, it was deliberate overreach. As I walked home, a neighbor called out from his porch. "Bold move, Rachel. Just watch your back." Last guy who crossed Karen? Violation notices every week. He moved within 2 months. Sure enough, a certified letter arrived days later listing fabricated violations. The shade of my court lines, the height of my fence. Petty. Predictable. But Karen didn't know who she was messing with. Because I'm Rachel Monroe, 38 years old, and I'm not just a homeowner. I'm a federal compliance auditor. I don't just follow the rules, I enforce them. And Karen? She just picked the wrong yard to trespass on. I have exclusive rights to that amenity, I told Karen Whitlow without raising my voice. Any further trespassing will be handled accordingly. Her expression turned to granite. "We've always had access to that court," she said through gritted teeth. "Always. The previous owner understood community spirit." "Did they?" I asked calmly. "Because I spoke with them yesterday, and they were very surprised to hear about this so-called arrangement." Truth was, I hadn't actually spoken to the previous owner. But the way Karen's jaw clenched in that brief, unguarded moment confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't a clerical mistake. This was an intentional power grab. As I walked home through the cool evening air of Silverwood Haven, A voice called from a porch down the block. "Bold move, Rachel," said a neighbor I didn't know well. "Just watch your back." The last guy who stood up to Karen? He started getting violations every week until he moved out. I thanked him and nodded, not missing the warning in his tone. Sure enough, the following week, peace disappeared like fog in sunlight. A certified letter arrived. Inside, an official HOA violation list from a recent inspection. Items included the non-compliant shade of white on my tennis court lines and recreational equipment exceeding height restrictions, though no such equipment existed. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw her, Karen, tape measure in hand, inspecting my court's perimeter like it was a crime scene. She didn't even flinch when I got out of my car. "Just confirming measurements for the violation report," she said with a sugar-sweet smile. "This has to stop," I told her, my voice quiet but firm. "Actually," she replied coldly, "it's just beginning. The board voted last night. Fines start Monday, $100 per day, per violation." I laughed. She clearly wasn't expecting that reaction. "Interesting timing," I said, "considering the board is only authorized to meet the first Thursday of the month, unless there's an emergency meeting with a 72-hour notice to all homeowners." I didn't get one. Did anyone else? Her smile twitched. "Administrative oversight. We'll resend." That weekend, I installed security cameras across my entire backyard. Every corner, every angle, covered. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. Monday morning, my doorbell rang. A county official stood on my porch, clipboard in hand. "Got a complaint about unpermitted structural modifications. Something about the tennis court not matching approved plans." I smiled. Perfect timing. I'd like to file a complaint too. What Karen didn't know, what no one in Silverwood Haven knew, was that I, Rachel Monroe, wasn't just a homeowner. I was a compliance auditor for the county planning department. I didn't just know the rules, I helped write them. And this smelled rotten. Light rain tapped the window of my home office as I spread out documents across my desk. It had been 3 weeks since Karen's little county inspection gambit had backfired spectacularly. The inspector she'd tried to sick on me, my colleague Miguel, found nothing wrong with my court. But he did find several inconsistencies in Karen's property records. "You won't believe what I found," I said over the phone to my sister, scanning emails from the county records office. "Karen's been HOA president for 6 years. But the bylaws only allow 4. "Who enforces that?" she asked. "The board," I said grimly, "which she appointed after the previous elected members mysteriously resigned within months of each other." That's when my doorbell rang again. A nervous-looking man in his 60s stood outside, glancing over his shoulder like someone was following him. "Sorry to bother you," he said softly. "I'm Raymond Blake. I used to be the HOA treasurer." I invited him in, offered coffee. He declined. His hand shook slightly as he sat down. "I saw what's happening with your tennis court. It's not the first time." He explained how Karen had slowly taken over anything she wanted: greenhouses, detached garages, workshops, by rewriting the rules and enforcing them selectively. "Why'd you quit?" I asked. He looked down. "Financial discrepancies I couldn't explain. HOA fees went up 3 times during my tenure, but the numbers never added up. When I asked questions, he trailed off. My wife started getting violation letters. Every day? For her rose garden. That's when I knew. This wasn't just personal. It was systemic. And it was time to expose it all. Day by day, the message became painfully clear: comply or be crushed. When I showed Raymond Blake the stack of documents I'd been compiling, his eyes widened. He traced the patterns with his fingers, silent for a moment before whispering, "You need to see the storage unit. Unit 23 at Safe Lock Storage. That's where they're hiding the real records." As he left, my phone buzzed with a new email: property assessment history for Silverwood Haven. One line stood out immediately. Karen Whitlow's home value had mysteriously decreased 3 years in a row, while the rest of the neighborhood saw steady increases. That meant significantly lower property taxes for her, thousands of dollars over time. That afternoon, I headed to Safe Lock under the pretense of renting a unit. The manager began showing me available options, but my eyes were already scanning the lot. That's when I saw him, the balding treasurer from the last HOA meeting, walking briskly out of Unit 23 with a banker's box in hand. He looked over his shoulder twice before stuffing the box into the trunk of his car and driving away. I followed at a safe distance. He pulled into Karen's driveway. From the street, I saw them inside through her large front window. Karen, the treasurer, and 2 other board members, all huddled around the dining table. Documents were spread across the surface like a battlefield. Occasionally, they glanced toward my house, visible down the road. My instincts kicked in. Time for a different approach. I drove straight to the county administration building, flashed my credentials, and requested historical aerial photographs of the neighborhood. I wasn't disappointed. The satellite photos showed that my tennis court had been built 4 years ago, well after Karen took over the HOA. No community access provisions were ever filed with the county. The next morning, the situation escalated. I was sipping coffee when I noticed a construction crew unloading outside my house. "We're here for the landscape modification for Silverwood Haven's community tennis facility," the foreman explained, showing me a work order signed by Karen. "Installing pathway lighting and expanding public access." I grabbed my phone and started filming as the crew began removing a section of my fence. Then I called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived quickly, recognizing the type of dispute immediately. "This appears to be a civil matter," he began. "Actually, it's trespassing and property damage." I cut in, showing him my deed and survey map. "And I'd like to press charges." Realizing they'd been thrown into something deeper than a routine job, the crew packed up and left in a hurry. That's when Karen's SUV screeched into my driveway like a storm cloud descending. She stepped out in designer sunglasses, her expression hidden but her fury obvious. "You've made a serious mistake," she snapped, ignoring Officer Ramirez. "The board has voted unanimously to place a lien on your property for unpaid violation fees." Officer Ramirez stepped in. "Ma'am, we're investigating potential criminal trespassing and vandalism. I suggest you leave this property now." Karen's composure wavered. "This is HOA business. Police have no jurisdiction in covenant enforcement. Destruction of private property falls well within our jurisdiction," he replied calmly. That evening, I received a cryptic text. "Community Center. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Others want to help. Come alone. F." I had a feeling I knew who F was. The next night, I entered a quiet, dimly lit room at the Silverwood Community Center. 7 residents gathered in the corner, their eyes cautious but determined. A woman stepped forward. "I'm Diane, former landscaping committee chair. Karen forced me out after I asked why we spent $20,000 on seasonal plantings that never showed up." Others shared similar stories: selective enforcement, retaliatory violations, mysterious budgets. Finally, Raymond Blake arrived, carrying a thumb drive and a manila folder. "I copied everything before I left," he said. 5 years of financials. "You should know, Karen's sister owns the landscaping company. They've received over $200,000 in HOA contracts." He paused, locking eyes with me. "Tennis court maintenance alone? Supposedly $35,000 a year. For a court that wasn't even community property." We sat in that cold room and built a plan. I would handle the legal documentation and escalate the county violations. Diane would start a special election petition. Others would dig into contracts, budgets, and retaliation complaints. This wasn't just about a court anymore. It was about taking our neighborhood back. Everyone left the meeting with a job. Mine was to dig into the bylaws and financial code violations. Others would gather evidence of selective enforcement and financial misconduct. As we packed up, headlights swept across the windows. Through the blinds, we saw Karen Whitlow's SUV circling the parking lot slowly, like a predator searching for weakness. "She's watching us," Diane whispered. "Good," I replied, "because now we're watching her, too." The next morning, I stepped outside and froze. My windshield was shattered. Lying among the glass shards was a tennis ball. A note was tucked beneath the wiper blade. "Accidents happen when you play dangerous games." I took a long breath, then snapped photos of everything before calling the police. As I waited, something about the tennis ball caught my attention. It wasn't like the ones I kept in my garage. The logo was different, custom-made, embroidered in gold. I'd seen it before. Karen's personal collection. Those trophies in her living room weren't just for show. She had her own monogrammed tennis balls. This was no coincidence. This was a message. And her first big mistake. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Miles Tran at a corner table in a quiet cafe. He slid a small USB drive across the table, then looked over his shoulder like someone might be watching. "They targeted you specifically," he said, voice low. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. I wouldn't be telling you this if I hadn't seen what they did to the Johnsons. The Johnsons? I asked, pocketing the drive. Bought a house with a backyard greenhouse, he explained. 2 months later, the HOA declared it a shared community garden. They changed the bylaws after the fact, then flooded them with violations until they moved. My stomach tightened. That's why Karen was so eager to have me join when I moved in, I realized aloud. Exactly, Miles nodded. They wanted you paying dues before springing the trap. Back at home, my hand shook as I plugged in the drive. Dozens of folders appeared on screen, each labeled with a property address. I clicked on mine. Photos of my tennis court from every angle. Construction blueprints. A folder labeled Community Acquisition Plan. Emails, some dating 6 months before I even bought the house. Karen had written, found the perfect new target property. Professional grade tennis court. East facing. Minimal neighbor visibility. New owner has no HOA experience, should be easy to pressure once bylaws are updated. Another email chilled me. Remember, refer to it as the community court in all conversations. Perception becomes reality. My pulse pounded. I flipped through file after file. Maps of my backyard with notes on fence weak points. A proposed calendar of tennis gatherings to establish use precedent. Budget projections for legal defense in case the owner resists. But the worst file? Phase 2, property acquisition. Karen hadn't just wanted the court. She wanted the entire house. Once violation fines accumulate sufficiently, she wrote, we can leverage for complete sale. Ideal location for future clubhouse expansion. I stood up and paced. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't petty entitlement. It was a calculated scheme. Movement outside caught my eye. Karen's husband, Tom, was across the street, clipboard in hand, casually taking photos of my yard. I snapped a picture of him from my window, heart pounding. Just then, my phone buzzed. Emily Carter, my neighbor across the street, sent a simple message, come over. Quietly. Inside her house, she pulled the blinds shut. They're doing to you what they did to us, she said, voice shaking. 3 years ago, they came for our pizza oven. Said it was a community gathering space. My husband fought back. He lost his job. The stress. He had a heart attack last year. My jaw tightened. Why are you helping me? Because Karen sent flowers afterward, with a note saying they'd respect our privacy now. Like she was doing us a favor. Emily swallowed hard. I'm done being scared. Her daughter Lily, no older than 15, appeared with a tray of lemonade. Mom stood up at a meeting last month, she said proudly. When they mentioned your tennis court, she got shouted down. There are more of us, Emily said quietly. People who are tired of Karen's reign. But we need proof, I added. And someone she can't bully. Her eyes locked onto mine. That's you. Someone like a government auditor? I said slowly, watching Emily Carter's eyes widen in surprise. You didn't tell me, she whispered. Brand new assignment, I nodded. I start tomorrow. Her expression shifted instantly. Relief, determination, maybe even hope. This changes everything. I left her house reinvigorated, but I wasn't about to get careless. That night, I reviewed footage from my security system. 3 different board members had casually walked past my property during the day, slowing down just enough to look like they weren't really looking. But I saw them. My phone buzzed again. It was an HOA email blast with the subject line, Exciting Community Court Improvement Project begins tomorrow. The body read, please avoid the construction area for safety. Work will begin on expansion of the community tennis facility. There was just one problem. I never approved any construction. I immediately called City Hall, but the offices had already closed. The after-hours line sent me in circles, and according to their records, the permits looked valid. That night, I didn't sleep. At dawn, the low rumble of engines pulled me to the window. Construction trucks were pulling up, workers unloading equipment. And standing at the center of it all? Karen Whitlow, clipboard in hand, wearing a white hard hat with the words Project Manager emblazoned in black across the front. I threw on clothes and bolted outside. A worker was measuring my garden wall with a laser device. Stop this immediately, I shouted, stepping between them and my property. The foreman looked confused. Ma'am, we've got permits right here. Says we're doing community expansion work. Karen strolled over with 3 board members following like loyal hounds. That smug smile on her face made my blood boil. Good morning, she called cheerfully, as if this was brunch and not an ambush. We're just implementing the improvements discussed at last month's meeting. We never discussed destroying my property, I snapped. I could see neighbors gathering, watching from porches and sidewalks. Karen's smile tightened. It was covered under new business, item 7. The minutes were approved unanimously. Then Tom Whitlow appeared with a man in a tailored suit and polished shoes. "This is Spencer Lang, our association attorney," Karen said smoothly. "He's here to ensure everything proceeds properly." Lang stepped forward, projecting authority. "We've documented 17 violations on your property over the past 60 days, he said, loud enough for the whole block to hear. "Under Section 12.4 of the HOA covenants, this work is within our rights." I didn't budge. I never signed off on construction. Lang's voice didn't waver. "Your purchase agreement included consent to HOA regulations, including the amendments passed last quarter." My thoughts raced. That amendment, a 50-page packet buried in legalese, labeled routine updates, had arrived months ago. I'd skimmed it. I should have read every line. Karen gestured dramatically toward my court. "The community has voted. The expansion begins today." She handed me a thick envelope. "These are your violation notices. You owe $14,500. Payment due in 7 days." Around us, the crowd murmured. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable. Most just averted their eyes. Karen had cultivated fear like it was fertilizer. And just as the bulldozer revved its engine, I played my card. "Actually, Karen," I said calmly, reaching into my bag, "I think you should know something before you break ground." I pulled out my government credentials. As of yesterday, I am the assigned federal auditor for all HOA financial practices in Maple Ridge Heights County. And wouldn't you know it, my first official case involves reviewing 5 years of HOA financials for Silverwood Haven, including all those special projects you've been managing. Karen's face went pale. Spencer Lang fell silent. The workers stopped what they were doing, waiting for direction. "Construction is officially postponed," I announced. "Any work done from this moment forward may interfere with a federal investigation. I suggest everyone keep their distance." I turned to the workers. "The permits you're carrying? I've already flagged them for verification." As I walked back toward my house, my phone rang. It was my supervisor. "There's been a request to remove you from the Maple Ridge Heights audit," he said flatly. "They're citing conflict of interest." My stomach dropped. "Let me guess," I said. "Karen already made some calls?" "More than calls," he replied. "The request came from someone with serious political connections." Had Karen already outmaneuvered me? Not quite. "Don't worry," he added. "You're not being removed. You're getting a partner. Starting tomorrow, this becomes a priority-level investigation." "The request came from someone with significant political connections," my supervisor said on the other end of the line. "Someone who really doesn't want you looking at those books." I tightened my grip on the phone, jaw locked. "And your decision?" I asked. "I'm assigning you a partner," he said without hesitation. "Starting tomorrow, you'll have backup." This just became a priority-level investigation. At exactly 6:15 a.m., a loud knock jolted me out of a restless sleep. I rushed to the peephole, still in pajamas. A tall woman in a sharp navy suit stood at my door, a federal ID already raised. "Agent Talia Green, Financial Crimes Division." When I opened the door, she gave me a firm nod. "You're Rachel Monroe?" "That's me. Your supervisor says you've stirred up quite the hornet's nest." "That's putting it mildly," I muttered, stepping aside to let her in. She set her laptop and several folders down on my dining table with military precision. "So you're the homeowner and the auditor they tried to steamroll. That's either awful luck or brilliant timing." "I'm leaning toward timing," I replied, pouring her a cup of coffee. "I've already had 3. We spent the next few hours reviewing everything I'd gathered, including files from Miles' trans USB drive." Talia flipped through documents with swift efficiency, her pen scribbling observations in shorthand only she could read. "They've been flagged before," she said, eyes narrowed. "Maple Ridge Heights HOA. 2 prior audits. Both mysteriously dropped." "Dropped?" I echoed. "Reassigned. Buried in paperwork. Quietly killed," she said, gaze steady. "Someone's protecting them. And that makes me very curious." Every few minutes, she'd pause to whistle under her breath at a particularly damning document. Off-the-books transfers, inflated maintenance charges, routing funds through special projects, accounts into shell companies. "Textbook laundering setup," she murmured. A knock on the door broke our focus. I opened it to find Emily Carter standing with 3 neighbors I hadn't met before. One of them, an older man in work boots, gave me a nod of solidarity. "We want to help," Emily said firmly. After what happened yesterday, people are finally ready to talk. For the next hour, my living room became something like a town hall. Martin, from 2 streets over, described how his koi pond was declared a community water feature. Mrs. Caldwell, 74, fought back tears as she recounted how daily fines forced her to remove the wheelchair ramp her husband needed to get to the car. Each story followed the same pattern. Karen Whitlow's board identifying desirable property features, twisting the rules, and applying pressure until homeowners either gave in or gave up. Talia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. It's not just about access to amenities, she concluded. It's about property value manipulation. Karen's real estate company controls most home resales in Silverwood Haven. She's creating premium listings using other people's land, I realized aloud, and selling those homes at inflated prices because of those shared amenities, Talia added. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Emergency HOA meeting. 7 p.m. tonight. She's telling everyone you're making false accusations. You'd better be there. We arrived at the Silverwood Community Center early. I'd never seen it so packed. Neighbors who rarely attended meetings now filled every seat, every corner. Karen sat at the center table, flanked by her board members and Spencer Lang, her smug-faced attorney. She looked composed on the surface, but the tightness around her eyes betrayed her tension. We've called this emergency session, Karen began once the murmuring faded, to address malicious and defamatory allegations being spread by a homeowner with a personal vendetta. More murmurs. People looked at one another uneasily. She doesn't want to share her tennis court, Karen continued, voice smooth. Unlike the rest of us, who share amenities freely. Instead, she's using her position as a government auditor to threaten and intimidate the very volunteers who serve this community. Spencer Lang stood next, full of theatrical concern. We filed a formal complaint citing a clear conflict of interest. In the meantime, we ask for your support as we continue our planned improvements for the benefit of everyone here. I scanned the crowd. A few residents nodded along. Karen clearly thought she was winning. Talia and I exchanged a glance. Time to change the strategy. I raised my hand. Reluctantly, Karen acknowledged me. I understand there may be concerns about a conflict of interest, I said calmly. Which is exactly why Agent Talia Green from the Federal Financial Crimes Division has been assigned as independent investigator. The room gasped, and the momentum shifted. Agent Talia Green from Financial Crimes has been assigned as an independent investigator. Gasps rippled through the room as I stepped aside and Talia wheeled forward 2 massive poster boards. She uncovered them with a dramatic flourish, revealing detailed maps of Silverwood Haven. Red sections were highlighted across the neighborhood, driveways, patios, backyards, private amenities. These red zones, I explained, represent privately owned properties that Karen Whitlow's HOA board has systematically targeted and reclassified as community features over the last 5 years. Residents surged toward the maps. My gazebo is marked in red, someone shouted. My koi pond too, said another. Before Karen could speak, Talia took the lead. We've also identified roughly $347,000 in questionable financial transfers from HOA accounts to businesses directly connected to board members. Spencer Lang, the HOA attorney, jumped to his feet. These accusations are outrageous. We demand. Would anyone care to explain, I cut in, why the HOA paid $58,000 to a landscaping company owned by Tom Whitlow for water feature maintenance on water features that actually belong to private homeowners who maintain them themselves? The room exploded with noise. Voices raised. Chairs scraped. Karen banged her gavel, desperately trying to regain control. This meeting will come to order. But just then, the double doors at the back of the room swung open. A local news crew entered, led by a familiar face, Tracy Holden, from Channel 9. A camera operator followed, already recording. Perfect timing, the reporters said. We received an anonymous tip about financial irregularities and property rights violations. Mrs. Whitlow, would you care to comment? Karen's face twisted with fury. This meeting is closed to the press. Security. But the security guard, a quiet man in his 60s, simply stepped aside. He wasn't going to stop the truth. Talia turned to the room. HOA bylaws require meetings to remain open to the public unless a privacy vote is held. Has such a vote occurred? The board's secretary, looking pale, shook her head. The floodgates opened. For the next hour, residents stood up one after another, sharing stories of bullying, manipulation, and fear. A mother with twins spoke of harassment after refusing to donate to the beautification fund. An elderly man shared how he was fined $900 for leaving his recycling bin out overnight after he'd just been released from the hospital. As the stories poured out, Karen's composure visibly crumbled. Then Tom Whitlow, her husband, quietly stood and walked toward the back exit. Talia gave me a nod and slipped out behind him. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to salvage what was left. Everything this board has done has been legally approved by majority vote. Check the records. I stepped to the podium. Funny you should mention those records, I said, holding up a folder. Because we've uncovered evidence suggesting meeting minutes were falsified, votes were recorded for absent members, and quorum requirements were routinely ignored. Right on cue, Talia returned, escorting Miles Trand, the former treasurer. He held a laptop, his expression grim. Tom Whitlow was attempting to delete files from the HOA server, she announced. We've secured the data. Karen lurched to her feet. This is absurd. You can't just. As a federal agent, Talia interrupted, I'm informing you that destroying or altering financial records during an active investigation is obstruction of justice. Spencer Lang leaned in and whispered something to Karen. Her shoulders slumped. She tried to muster a defense. We believed in this community. Everything we did was for property values. An older man in the third row slowly stood. My wife and I have lived here 30 years. We don't care about property values if it means living in fear of our neighbors. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in this board, he declared. I second, Emily Carter called out. The secretary hesitated, visibly torn. Karen's fury blazed beside her. But then Talia said firmly, either record the motion or explain to federal investigators why proper procedure is being obstructed. Hands shot up across the room. It wasn't even close. Karen Whitlow had lost control of Silverwood Haven. As I stood quietly, watching it all unfold, I felt a tap on my shoulder. A young couple stood behind me, clutching a flyer. We almost bought a house here last month, the father said. Karen's real estate office gave us a tour. Bragged about the shared amenities, especially the tennis courts. Said HOA fees were low thanks to efficient management. I looked them in the eye. Did you sign anything? Not yet, the mother whispered. But we're really glad we came to this meeting. And for the first time in months, I felt hope ripple through the room. Real hope, not manipulated silence. Did you sign anything? I asked the young couple quietly. We were about to, the mother said. Then we saw the news van outside and decided to check out the meeting first. Karen Whitlow's real estate business. Another thread to pull. I motioned Agent Talia Green over as the meeting dissolved into a flurry of discussions about emergency board elections. We need to look into how many homes she sold using other people's property as marketing points, I whispered. Talia nodded. Already started. And for the record, I didn't need her to finish. I'd already frozen the HOA accounts pending investigation. Outside, neighbors lingered in heated discussion. Some laughed for the first time in weeks. Others clutched printouts and property maps like they were sacred texts. Karen shoved her way through the crowd toward me, her face twisted in rage. You've destroyed everything I built, she hissed. This community was nothing before I took over. I met her stare. Calm, unshaken. You built it by stealing from your neighbors, I replied. That's not leadership. That's fraud. Her eyes flicked toward my tennis court in the distance. That court was never up to code anyway, she sneered. One call to building inspection, and already done. A voice cut in from behind us. We turned. Miguel Reyes, the county building inspector, stood with his clipboard. I was contacted by Agent Green's office this afternoon. I inspected the court myself. Everything's perfectly up to code. Karen didn't say another word. She spun around and stormed toward Tom Whitlow's SUV. As the vehicle drove off, Emily Carter approached with several neighbors in tow. We're having an impromptu get-together at my place, she smiled. To celebrate. And maybe figure out what comes next, real community building. Want to join? I looked around at the faces, hopeful, energized, united. Karen hadn't built a community. She tried to control one. But in trying to dominate us, she'd inadvertently done the impossible, brought everyone together. I smiled. Anyone up for a friendly game of tennis? My court's open. To guests. Real ones, not trespassers. As we walked toward my house, my phone buzzed again. It was my supervisor. You've kicked quite the hornet's nest, he said, not bothering with hello. The mayor just called me personally. My heart sank. Are we being pulled from the investigation? Quite the opposite, he replied. Turns out Karen's husband does landscaping for several government buildings. The mayor wants to ensure there's no overlap with city contracts. This thing, it just got bigger. How much bigger? You may want to clear your schedule. We could be headed to the state level. As we reached the edge of my property, I spotted a familiar figure. Spencer Lang, Karen's private attorney, was lurking near the tennis court, snapping photos with his phone. Our eyes met. He didn't look away. This wasn't over. Later that night, water dripped from my hair as I stood in the kitchen. The emergency sprinklers, illegally installed by Karen without permits, had gone off while I was reviewing evidence near the window. My laptop, thankfully waterproof, displayed a new email from the county inspector's office. Your request for emergency property line verification has been approved. Inspection scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I was toweling off when my phone rang. Miles Tran's voice came through, hushed and urgent. They've called an emergency board meeting tonight. My contact says Karen's claiming you falsified government credentials. She's pushing for immediate legal action. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight press in. They're moving faster than I expected. There's more, Miles whispered. Karen's brother-in-law. He just got appointed as a local judge, the same court that handles HOA disputes. My heart dropped. Then came the doorbell. I peeked through the peephole. Karen Whitlow, flanked by two unfamiliar men, stood on my porch. One held a camera. The other carried a folder stamped with the county seal. Hello, neighbor, Karen sang sweetly through the door. We have the building inspector here about the dangerous structural issues we reported. We'll need full access to your home, immediately. I didn't open the door. Not fully. Instead, I slid the security chain into place and cracked it just enough to speak. Perfect timing, I said calmly. I was just getting off the phone with Chief Inspector Williams. He'll want to verify your credentials, Liv. The man holding the seal shifted nervously. I can come back later. I'm sure you can, I said. But before you go, I'll need your name and badge number for my report. Karen's face hardened. They turned and left without another word. And I knew then, we had them rattled. Through the security chain, I smiled calmly. Perfect timing, I said. I was just on the phone with Chief Inspector Williams about tomorrow's appointment. Would you mind if I looped him in to verify your credentials? The so-called inspector glanced nervously at Karen Whitlow, then stammered. I can come back later, actually. I insist, I said firmly. But before you leave, I'll need your full name and badge number for my report. They turned and left without another word. Karen's face twisted in frustration as she followed them down the walkway like a storm cloud in retreat. That night, I didn't sleep. I worked until dawn, surrounded by piles of files and glowing monitors. Miles Tran's documents were spread across my living room wall like a conspiracy board. Bank statements, backdated invoices, and falsified contracts. Red string connected everything. HOA accounts, shell companies, and Karen's sister receiving payments for services never rendered. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. Meeting minutes had been mysteriously altered, property assessments manipulated, and at least 5 other homeowners had been pressured into selling after being targeted, just like me. My eyes burned as I stared at the wall of corruption. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Greenleaf Cafe. 7 a.m. Come alone. Attached was a photo of Karen shaking hands with someone I immediately recognized. Mayor Alan Price, the very official whose campaign finances I'd been assigned to audit next month. The stakes had just escalated. This wasn't about tennis courts anymore. This was about power, money, and corruption reaching deep into local government, and I had landed squarely in its path. Rain pounded on my windshield the next morning as I pulled into the empty cafe parking lot. A tall figure stood under a dark umbrella, waiting. It wasn't Miles. It was Councilwoman Denise Park, chair of the State Ethics Oversight Committee. Without a word, she slid into my passenger seat, holding a slim folder. I received something yesterday, she said. Anonymous drop. Had your name in it. She opened the folder to reveal records. Clear documentation of HOA funds being funneled into a foundation controlled by Mayor Price. She looked me dead in the eye. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Monroe. Now you've got a choice. Walk away and take a transfer, or help me blow this wide open. I handed her my own folder. The real inspector will be at my house in 90 minutes. Karen has violated state law on multiple counts. I'm not backing down. Denise smiled for the first time. Then let's make sure you're not fighting this alone. Hours later, I stood at my window watching as Channel 7 News vans lined the street. Councilwoman Park had moved fast. At the property line, a real inspector stood with surveying gear. Karen and 3 board members lingered nearby, visibly shaken. My doorbell rang. This time, I opened it confidently. "Miss Whitlow," I greeted. "I believe you know Councilwoman Park and State Attorney Davis." Karen's smirk faded. "This is a private neighborhood matter," she muttered. "It's being blown out of proportion." "Private matters," Attorney Davis said coolly, "don't usually involve $347,000 in misappropriated HOA funds and falsified government documents." My phone buzzed again, this time with messages from neighbors I'd never even met. A retired lawyer down the street offered pro bono legal help. A family across the road sent over surveillance footage of board members measuring my tennis court under cover of night. Later that day, Karen finally caved. "The board has voted to drop all claims regarding your property," she said through gritted teeth. It was a simple misunderstanding. I shook my head. Unfortunately, the state's investigation isn't something you can vote away. By sunset, resignation letters from Karen and 2 other board members had landed in every resident's mailbox. The emergency election held the following week saw record turnout. Miles Tran was elected interim president, with a community-backed mandate for transparency and reform. And yet, the victory felt complicated. As I cleaned up files and folded maps, I couldn't ignore the damage already done. 5 families had sold their homes under pressure. Good people, forced out because they didn't fight back fast enough. The mayor had distanced himself, publicly dismissing any connection to HOA operations. But I knew better. This was only the beginning. Through the security chain, I smiled calmly. Perfect timing. I was just speaking with Chief Inspector Williams about tomorrow's appointment. "Would you mind waiting while I conference him in to verify your credentials?" The so-called inspector's eyes darted to Karen Whitlow, visibly uneasy. I can come back later. I'll still need your name and badge number for my report," I added, not moving an inch. They retreated faster than they arrived. Karen's face twisted with fury. That night, I didn't sleep. I worked until dawn, scanning every document Miles Tran had provided: financial records, board minutes, paper trails. On my living room wall, I mapped everything. Payments to Karen's sister for services never rendered, manipulated meeting minutes, property records that revealed a pattern. 5 homeowners pressured into selling before me. Exhausted, my eyes burned as my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Backlot behind Greenleaf Cafe. 7 a.m. Come alone." Attached was a photo of Karen shaking hands with someone I recognized immediately, Mayor Alan Price, whose campaign finances I was due to audit next month. This was no longer about a tennis court. It was about power, corruption, and control, seeping into every level of local government. The next morning, rain lashed my windshield as I pulled into the cafe's parking lot. A tall figure waited under an umbrella. "Not Miles, Councilwoman Denise Park." "I received something interesting," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Anonymous delivery. HOA funds tied to the mayor's foundation, with your name flagged." She looked me square in the eye. "You've stirred up something serious. Walk away quietly, or help me blow it open." I handed her my folder. "I'm in. The real inspector arrives in 90 minutes. Everything Karen's done violates state law." She smiled for the first time. "Then let's make sure you're not alone in this." And that's how we took the fight beyond Silverwood Haven, to the heart of Maple Ridge Heights corruption itself.